The mahogany conference table in Whitman and Associates law firm felt cold beneath my trembling hands as I sat across from my three siblings. The Seattle rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, matching the rhythm of my anxious heartbeat. After 43 years of life, I thought I knew my place in the Morrison family hierarchy. Somewhere near the bottom, just above the family dog. "Thank you all for coming," Mr. Whitman said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. His voice carried the weight of decades spent delivering life-changing news. "I know this is difficult, losing Robert so suddenly." My older brother Marcus shifted in his expensive seat, checking his Rolex for the third time in 10 minutes. At 47, he'd inherited Dad's impatience along with his steel-grey eyes. "Can we just get this over with? I have a board meeting." At 3. Sarah, my twin sister, shot him a disapproving look. Despite being born just 12 minutes after me, she'd always acted like the older, wiser sibling. Her perfectly manicured fingers drummed against her designer purse. "Show some respect, Marcus. Dad's been gone less than a week." "Respect?" Marcus scoffed. Where was his respect when he worked 16-hour days and missed every important moment of our lives? My youngest brother David, 28, and still finding his way in the world, remained silent. He'd always been the peacekeeper, the one who tried to hold our fractured family together with optimism and forced smiles. I said nothing. I'd learned long ago that my voice carried little weight in family discussions. While my siblings had pursued prestigious careers, Marcus in corporate law, Sarah in investment banking, David in tech startups, I'd chosen a different path. Teaching high school English in a modest public school didn't exactly scream success in the Morrison family vocabulary. Mr. Whitman cleared his throat and opened the thick manila folder. Robert Morrison's last will and testament, dated March 15th, 2024. The formal words seemed to echo in the sterile room. "To my son Marcus Morrison, I leave my shares in Morrison Industries, valued at approximately $12 million, along with the family estate in Bellevue." Marcus's face remained impassive, but I caught the slight upturn of his lips. He'd expected this, the golden child getting the golden prize. "To my daughter Sarah Morrison, I leave my investment portfolio and real estate holdings, valued at approximately $8 million, including the vacation home in the San Juan Islands." Sarah's eyes glistened with tears, though whether from grief or relief, I couldn't tell. She'd always been Dad's little princess, the one who could do no wrong. "To my son David Morrison, I leave my collection of vintage automobiles and the downtown Seattle penthouse, valued at approximately $6 million. Even David, the family's eternal optimist, couldn't hide his surprise. Dad had always criticized his frivolous career choices. Yet here he was, receiving a fortune. My heart pounded as Mr. Whitman's eyes found mine. This was it, my moment. Maybe Dad had seen something in me after all. Maybe all those years of feeling invisible had been leading to this vindication. "To my daughter Emma Morrison... Mr. Whitman paused, and I held my breath. "I leave this." He reached into a small velvet pouch and placed something on the table in front of me. It was a key, old, tarnished, and completely unremarkable. The metal was worn smooth in places, suggesting years of handling, but it looked like something you might find in a junk drawer. The silence in the room was deafening. I stared at the key, my vision blurring as tears threatened to spill. This was it. This was my inheritance. A rusty old key while my siblings received millions. That's it. Sarah's voice cut through the silence, sharp with disbelief. "A key? What's it even for?" Mr. Whitman consulted his papers. "The will doesn't specify. It simply states that Emma should receive the key that opens what matters most." Marcus let out a bitter laugh. Typical Dad. Even in death, he He's playing favorites and speaking in riddles. He stood up, straightening his tie. Well, Emma, I guess you got what you deserved after all. The words hit me like a physical blow. What I deserved. For what? For choosing a career that fulfilled me rather than one that impressed him. For staying close to home instead of chasing prestige in distant cities. For being the one who visited Dad every Sunday. Who brought him soup when he was sick. Who listened to his stories about the old days. Marcus, that's enough, David said. Quietly, but his protest lacked conviction. Sarah was already gathering her things. I'm sorry, Emma. I really am. But maybe Dad had his reasons. Her tone suggested she couldn't imagine what those reasons might be. As my siblings filed out of the conference room, their footsteps echoing in the hallway, I remained seated, staring at the key. The weight of it in my palm felt heavier than it should have, as if it carried the weight of all my disappointments, all my years of feeling like an outsider in my own family. Miss Morrison? Mr. Whitman's gentle voice broke through my thoughts. I know this must be difficult. I looked up at him, this stranger who'd just delivered the final confirmation that I'd never been enough for my father. Did he say anything else? About me, I mean? The elderly lawyer's expression softened. Your father was a complex man, Miss Morrison. But I can tell you this. He spoke of you often in our meetings, more than you might think. Then why? The question came out as barely a whisper. Why give me nothing while they get everything? Mr. Whitman was quiet for a long moment, studying me with kind eyes. Perhaps, he said finally, the question isn't why he gave you so little, but why he gave you something so specific. In my 40 years of practice, I've learned that the most meaningful gifts aren't always the most obvious ones. I wanted to believe him, that sitting there with my inheritance, a key to nowhere, it was hard to see past the humiliation. My siblings would go home to their mansions and luxury cars, while I'd return to my modest apartment with nothing but questions and a heart full of hurt. As I finally stood to leave, clutching the key in my fist, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of the story. Dad had always been a man of purpose, even when that purpose wasn't clear to the rest of us. But what purpose could there be in leaving me with nothing but a mystery? The Seattle rain had intensified by the time I reached the parking lot, and as I sat in my 10-year-old Honda Civic, watching my siblings drive away in their luxury vehicles, I made a decision. I would find out what this key opened, even if it killed me. Because maybe, just maybe, understanding this final puzzle would help me understand why I'd spent my entire life feeling like a stranger in my own family. 3 days passed in a blur of sleepless nights and unanswered questions. I tried the key on every lock I could think of. Dad's house, his office, even the old tool shed behind the family estate. Nothing. The key seemed to mock me with its silence, offering no clues about its purpose or significance. I was grading papers in my small apartment when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Whitman and Associates. Miss Morrison? This is Harold Whitman. I was wondering if you might have a moment to come back to my office. There's something I need to discuss with you privately. My heart skipped. Is this about the key? Among other things, yes. Would this afternoon work for you? I was there within the hour, my hands shaking slightly as I entered the familiar conference room. This time, Mr. Whitman had prepared tea, and the gesture felt oddly comforting. Thank you for coming so quickly, he said, settling into his chair with a heavy sigh. I've been wrestling with this decision since the reading. Your father left me with specific instructions, but I wasn't sure if I should follow them. What kind of instructions? Mr. Whitman reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope with my name written in Dad's familiar handwriting. He asked me to give you this only if you came back asking about the key. He said you would. That you were the only one who would care enough to dig deeper. My hands trembled as I took the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with an address I didn't recognize. 1247 Pine Street, Unit 23B. Below it, in Dad's careful script, were the words, "The truth about who we really are." "Pine Street," I murmured. "That's in the warehouse district." "Your father rented that storage unit 15 years ago," Mr. Whitman explained. "He paid for it annually, always in cash. I handled the paperwork, but he never told me what he kept there. 15 years ago. I tried to remember what had been happening in our family then. That was right after Mom died." "Yes," Mr. Whitman's expression grew somber. "Your father changed after Margaret's passing. He became more secretive, distant, but also more protective of certain things." I stared at the address, my mind racing. Why didn't he just tell me about this? Why all the mystery? "I think," Mr. Whitman said carefully, "your father was protecting you from something, or perhaps protecting something for you. He mentioned once that you were the only one who truly understood him, the only one who saw past his gruff exterior to the man underneath." The words brought fresh tears to my eyes. And why did he make me feel so invisible all these years? Sometimes, Miss Morrison, the people we love most are the ones we struggle hardest to show our love to. Your father was a proud man, perhaps too proud, but he trusted you with this key for a reason. I stood up, clutching the paper and the key. "I need to go there, now. Would you like me to accompany you? I have to admit, I'm curious myself." The warehouse district was a maze of industrial buildings and self-storage facilities. Pine Street. Storage looked like dozens of others. A long, low building with rows of orange roll-up doors. Unit 23B was on the second floor, tucked away in a corner that felt deliberately hidden. My hands shook as I inserted the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, as if it had been waiting for this moment. The door rolled up with a metallic screech that echoed through the empty hallway. What I saw inside took my breath away. The unit was larger than I'd expected, and it was filled with carefully organized boxes, filing cabinets, and what appeared to be years' worth of documents. But it was the walls that made me gasp. They were covered with photographs, hundreds of them. Pictures of me at my high school graduation. Me receiving my teaching award. Me reading to children at the local library. Me volunteering at the homeless shelter. Photos I didn't even know existed, spanning decades of my life. "My God," Mr. Whitman whispered behind me. I moved deeper into the unit, my legs unsteady. There were newspaper clippings too. Every article that had ever mentioned my name. Every small achievement I'd thought had gone unnoticed. A feature. Story about my innovative teaching methods. A letter to the editor I'd written about education funding. Even a photo from the local paper when my students had won the state poetry competition. But it was the handwritten notes that broke my heart. Scattered among the photos were dozens of pieces of paper in Dad's handwriting. "Emma's students love her. She's making a real difference. Saw Emma at the grocery store helping an elderly woman with her bags. Margaret would be so proud. Emma called to check on me today. She's the only one who remembers." I sank into a folding chair that had been placed in the center of the unit, overwhelmed by the evidence of a love I'd never known existed. Dad had been watching me, documenting my life, celebrating my achievements in secret. "There's more," Mr. Whitman said gently, pointing to a large filing cabinet. Inside the cabinet were financial documents that made my head spin. Bank statements, investment records, property deeds, all in my name. As the first pieced together the papers, a stunning picture emerged. For the past 15 years, Dad had been quietly building a fortune specifically for me. Not the flashy, obvious wealth he'd left to my siblings, but something deeper and more substantial. Real estate investments carefully chosen stocks, bonds that had matured over time. The total value was staggering, nearly $20 million, more than any of my siblings had received. But there was something else, something that explained why he'd kept this secret for so long. At the bottom of the filing cabinet was a folder labeled Morrison Industries, The Truth. Inside were documents that revealed the dark reality behind the family business. Morrison Industries, the company that had made our family wealthy, had been built on a foundation of corruption. Illegal contracts, environmental violations, worker exploitation. The evidence was damning and comprehensive. He knew, I whispered, understanding flooding through me. He knew what the company really was, and he couldn't bear to leave me any part of it. Mr. Whitman was reading over my shoulder, his face pale. This explains so much. Your father's guilt, his distance from the family business in later years, his insistence on keeping you separate from it all. There was one final document, a letter addressed to me, dated just a month before Dad's death. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, then you found what I've spent 15 years building for you. I know you must be hurt and confused by the will reading, but I hope you'll understand that I couldn't give you what I gave your siblings. They wanted the family business, the prestige, the obvious wealth. But you, my darling girl, you wanted something I could never give them. My respect, my pride, my love. You were the only one who chose a path of service over profit, who stayed true to your values even when it meant being overlooked and undervalued. You were the only one who visited me not because you wanted something, but because you cared. You were the only one I trust with the truth about our family, and the only one I trust to decide what to do with it. The money in these accounts is clean, earned through legitimate investments, separate from Morrison Industries. It's yours to do with as you choose. But more than that, the choice of what to do about the company is yours as well. You have the evidence to expose the truth, to bring justice to those who have been wronged. Or you can choose to let sleeping dogs lie and simply walk away. I know I failed you in life, Emma. I was too proud, too afraid of my own emotions to show you how much you meant to me. That you were always my favorite, my pride and joy. The child who reminded me most of your mother's goodness and strength. I love you more than words can express, and I trust you to make the right choice, whatever that may be. Your devoted father, Robert Morrison. I was sobbing by the time I finished reading, the letter clutched to my chest. All those years of feeling invisible, of believing I wasn't good enough, of watching my siblings receive the attention and approval I craved. And, all along, Dad had been loving me in the only way he knew how. He protected you, Mr. Whitman said softly. He kept you away from the corruption, because he couldn't bear to see it touch you. I looked around the storage unit again, seeing it with new eyes. This wasn't just a collection of my memories. It was a shrine to the daughter he'd been too emotionally stunted to celebrate openly. Every photo, every clipping, every note was proof of a love so deep he'd had to hide it away like a precious secret. But now I faced an impossible choice. I had the power to destroy Morrison Industries, to expose the truth and seek justice for all those who had been harmed. But doing so would also destroy my siblings, who had built their lives on the foundation of the family business. As I sat, that storage unit, surrounded by the evidence of my father's secret love and his terrible burden, I realized that the real inheritance he'd left me wasn't money or property. It was the weight of moral responsibility, the burden of choosing between justice and family loyalty. And for the first time in my life, I understood why he'd chosen me to carry it. I spent the next week in a state of emotional whiplash, alternating Between euphoria at discovering Dad's love and anguish over the impossible choice he'd left me. The storage unit became my second home as I pored over every document, trying to understand the full scope of Morrison Industries' crimes. The evidence was overwhelming. Illegal dumping that had poisoned groundwater in 3 counties. Safety violations that had led to worker injuries and deaths. Bribes to government officials to secure contracts that should have gone to legitimate companies. The human cost was staggering, and it had all been hidden behind the respectable facade of a successful family business. My phone had been ringing constantly, my siblings wanting to check on me after the will reading, though I suspected they were more curious about my mysterious inheritance than concerned about my well-being. I'd been avoiding their calls, but I knew I couldn't hide forever. The confrontation came on a rainy Thursday evening when I returned to my apartment to find Marcus waiting in the lobby. "We need to talk," he said without preamble, his expensive suit wrinkled and his usually perfect hair disheveled. "You've been avoiding us for a week." "I've been processing," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Processing what?" "A rusty key." His laugh was bitter. "Come on, Emma, we're family. If you're upset about the will, we can work something out. I could give you a position at Morrison Industries, maybe set you up with a small trust fund." The condescension in his voice made my blood boil. Even now, even after everything, he still saw me as the family charity case. "I don't need your pity, Marcus." "Then what do you need?" "Because frankly, your behavior is starting to worry us. Sarah thinks you might be having some kind of breakdown." I studied my brother's face, seeing Dad's features reflected there but none of his hidden depth. Marcus had always been surface level, concerned with appearances and status. The idea that there might be more to Dad's final gift than met the eye had never occurred to him. "What if I told you that Key was worth more than all your inheritances?" Combined? Marcus's expression shifted from condescension to skepticism. "I'd say you're delusional." "Emma, I know you're hurt, but 1247 Pine Street, Unit 23B, I interrupted. The color drained from his face. "How do you know about that?" My heart stopped. "You know about the storage unit?" Marcus ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking older than his 47 years. "Dad mentioned it once, years ago. Said he kept some old business records there. But I assumed it was just paperwork." "What else did he tell you?" "Nothing. Just that it was off limits, that none of us should ever go there." Marcus's voice rose with frustration. "Emma, what's in that unit? I made a decision that would change everything. Come with me, see for yourself." The drive to the storage facility was tense and silent. Marcus followed me in his BMW, and I could see him in my rearview mirror, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. Whatever he suspected was in that unit, it was enough to terrify him. When I rolled up the door to Unit 23B, Marcus's reaction was immediate and visceral. He staggered backward as if he'd been physically struck, his face going ashen as he took in the walls covered with photos of me. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "He was obsessed with you." "He loved me," I corrected, but I could understand how it might look to someone who didn't know the full story. Marcus moved deeper into the unit, his eyes scanning the evidence of Dad's secret devotion. "All these years, I thought he barely tolerated you. The way he acted, always so distant." "He was protecting me," I said, opening the filing cabinet. From this, I handed him the folder labeled Morrison Industries, The Truth, watching as his face went from confusion to horror to despair as he read through the documents. "This can't be real," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Dad wouldn't. He couldn't. He didn't start it," I said gently. "Most of this happened before he took over the company." But he knew about it, and he couldn't find a way to stop it without destroying everything. Marcus sank into the folding chair, the papers scattered around his feet. My God, Emma. Do you know what this means? If this gets out, Morrison Industries will be destroyed. You'll lose everything. All of you. And you? His eyes met mine. And for the first time in years, I saw my brother. Not the successful lawyer, not the golden child, but the scared little boy who used to have nightmares and crawl into my bed for comfort. I have a choice to make, I said simply. Over the next hour, I showed Marcus everything. The financial documents that proved Dad had built me a separate fortune, the evidence of the company's crimes, and finally, Dad's letter explaining his impossible position. He gave you the power to destroy us, Marcus said when I finished. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. He gave me the power to seek justice, I corrected. What I do with it is up to me. Marcus was quiet for a long time, staring at the photos on the walls. He really did love you most, didn't he? The question was asked without bitterness, just a kind of wondering sadness. He loved all of us, I said. But he trusted me with this because he knew I'd struggle with it, that I wouldn't make the decision lightly. What are you going to do? I've been asking myself the same question for days. I don't know yet. Marcus stood up slowly, looking every one of his 47 years. For what it's worth, Emma, I'm sorry. For how we treated you. For making you feel like you didn't matter. We were wrong. You were following Dad's lead, I said. He made sure you never saw how much I meant to him, because he was afraid you'd figure out what he was hiding. That doesn't excuse it. Marcus picked up one of the photos, me at my college. Graduation, beaming with pride while the family looked on with polite disinterest. We should have seen it ourselves. Should have valued you for who you are, not for what you could contribute to the family business. As we prepared to leave the storage unit, Marcus turned to me one last time. Whatever you decide, Emma, I want you to know that I understand. If you choose to expose the truth, I won't fight you. Maybe it's time for the Morrison family to face the consequences of what we've built our lives on. Driving home that night, I felt the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders like a heavy cloak. I had the power to right decades of wrongs, to bring justice to the victims of Morrison Industries crimes. But I also had the power to destroy the lives of my siblings, who were guilty of nothing more than being born into a family built on lies. Dad had given me the ultimate test of character, and I was beginning to understand why he'd chosen me to face it. Not because I was his favorite, but because I was the only one who would truly wrestle with the moral implications of the choice. The question that haunted me as I lay awake that night wasn't what I should do. Deep down, I already knew the answer to that. The question was whether I had the courage to do it, knowing the cost it would exact on everyone I loved. The family. Meeting I called for the following Sunday was unlike any we'd ever had. For the first time in years, all 4 Morrison siblings sat around the same table. Not in a lawyer's office or at a formal family gathering, but in my modest apartment, drinking coffee from mismatched mugs and facing the truth about our family legacy. I'd spent 3 sleepless nights preparing for this moment, knowing that what I said would change everything between us forever. Sarah sat rigidly in her chair, her designer clothes looking out of place in my simple living room. David fidgeted, with his phone, nervous energy radiating from him in waves. Marcus looked like he'd aged a decade since our visit to the storage unit. I know Marcus has told you about what I found, I began, my voice steadier than I felt. But I wanted you all to hear it from me. I laid out everything. Dad's secret, documentation of my life, the hidden fortune he'd built for me, and most importantly, the evidence of Morrison Industries crimes. Sarah's face went white as I described the environmental damage, David actually got sick and had to excuse himself to the bathroom when I read the reports about worker deaths. "This is impossible," Sarah said when I finished, but her voice was hollow. "Dad was a good man. He donated to charities. He supported the community. He was a good man trapped in an impossible situation," I replied. "He inherited a company built on corruption, and he spent his entire life trying to find a way to make it right, without destroying his family in the process. So he dumped the problem on you instead," David said bitterly, returning from the bathroom with a pale face. "That's not fair, Emma. That's not love. That's cowardice." His words stung because part of me agreed with them. But I'd had time to think about Dad's motivations, and I understood them better now. "He gave me a choice," I said. "He could have taken this secret to his grave and left the victims without any hope of justice. Instead, he trusted me to decide what was right." "And what have you decided?" Sarah asked, though her expression suggested she already knew. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "I'm going to expose everything. I'm turning the evidence over to the FBI, the EPA, and the families of the victims. Morrison Industries will face the consequences of its actions." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah began to cry quietly, her perfect composure finally cracking. David stared at his hands, his shoulders shaking. Marcus just nodded slowly, as if he'd been expecting this. "You'll destroy us," Sarah whispered. "Everything we've worked for, everything we've built." "Everything you've built was paid for with blood money," I said, hating how harsh the words sounded but knowing they were true. "The victims of Morrison Industries deserve justice, even if it comes at our expense." "What about the employees?" David asked. "The company employs over 3,000 people. They'll all lose their jobs." It was a question that had kept me awake for nights. "I've thought about that. I'm using part of Dad's inheritance to set up a fund for displaced workers. Job training, placement services, financial support during the transition. It won't solve everything, but it's a start." "And us?" Marcus asked quietly. "You'll face criminal charges if the evidence supports it. You'll lose your inheritances when the company is dissolved. But you'll have something more valuable, the chance to make things right." Over the next several hours, we talked through the implications of my decision. Sarah was angry at first, accusing me of jealousy and revenge. But as the reality of the situation sank in, her anger gave way to a kind of resigned acceptance. "Maybe this is what we deserve," she said finally. "Maybe Dad was right to keep us away from the truth. We were so focused on the money and the prestige that we never asked where it came from." David was struggling the most with the revelation. As the youngest, he'd always looked up to Dad as a hero. Learning about the company's crimes shattered his worldview in a way that was painful to watch. "How do we live with this?" he asked. "How do we face people knowing what our family has done?" "The same way Dad lived with it," I said. "By trying to do better, by using whatever resources we have left to help the people who were hurt." Marcus had been quiet for most of the conversation, but now he spoke up. "I want to help. With the worker fund, with the victim compensation, with whatever needs to be done. I may not be able to practice law after this comes out, but I can use my knowledge to help make things right." "Me too," Sarah said, wiping her eyes. "I have contacts in the financial world. People who might be willing to help with job placement and retraining programs." Even David, despite his shock and pain, nodded his agreement. "I guess it's time to find out what we're really made of, isn't it?" The process of exposing Morrison Industries took months. The FBI investigation was thorough and devastating, uncovering even more crimes than Dad's documents had revealed. The media attention was intense and often cruel, painting our family as monsters who had profited from others' suffering. But something unexpected happened as the truth came out. The victims and their families, rather than seeking revenge, showed remarkable grace and forgiveness. They understood that I had chosen to sacrifice my family's wealth and reputation to bring them justice, and many of them reached out to thank me personally. My siblings faced criminal charges, but their cooperation with the investigation and their efforts to help the victims led to reduced sentences. Marcus served 18 months in minimum security prison and now works for a non-profit legal aid organization. Sarah lost her banking license but found new purpose running a foundation for environmental cleanup. David used his tech skills to create job placement platforms for displaced workers. As for me, I returned to teaching, but with a new sense of purpose. The money Dad left me, what remained after victim compensation and worker support, allowed me to start a scholarship program for students from low-income families. I also established a whistleblower protection fund to help others who faced the same impossible choice Dad had faced. The storage unit on Pine Street is empty now, its contents distributed to investigators and victims' families. But I kept one thing: a photo of me and Dad from my college graduation, one of the few pictures where his pride in me was visible on his face. It sits on my desk at school, a reminder that love sometimes comes in forms we don't expect or understand. My siblings and I are closer now than we've ever been. The shared experience of losing everything and rebuilding from nothing has created a bond between us that wealth and privilege never could. We meet every Sunday for dinner, not in expensive restaurants or family estates, but in each other's modest homes, cooking simple meals and talking about what really matters. The Morrison family name will forever be associated with scandal and corruption, but it's also becoming associated with redemption and justice. We can't undo the harm that was done in our name, but we can spend the rest of our lives trying to make amends. Dad's final gift to me wasn't the money or the evidence or even the terrible choice he forced me to make. It was the knowledge that he had seen something in me worth trusting with the truth. Something that made him believe I would choose justice over comfort, courage over convenience. He was right to trust me, and I hope that wherever he is, he knows that his faith in me wasn't misplaced. The key he left me didn't just open a storage unit. It opened the door to becoming the person he always believed I could be. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't what we receive, but what we choose to do with it. And sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that define who we really are. In the end, Dad didn't ignore me in his will. He gave me the most important gift of all, the chance to discover that I was stronger, braver, and more principled than I ever knew. And that knowledge, unlike money or property, is something that can never be taken away.